We have 11 people waiting.
I think we are live now.
We are? Okay.
Great.
There we are. We have 11 people waiting. Yes, we're live.
Sorry, just 1 second. I had some open windows that were having some echo.
We are? We are. Okay.
Great.
There we are.
Can everyone hear me? I'm sorry, my connection is kind of bad and I'm keep hearing the same thing over and over again. Open windows that were. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining Eval's Knowledge Exchange series. This is the second edition, and today we are going to discuss usability of evaluations. I am joined here by our senior associate, Fabrizio Ricciuti, and Andrea, who is an evaluator that worked with us in an AMS evaluation. I will hand over to them for an introduction. Thank you.
Great, a pleasure to be here. Once again, thank you, Yasmin, for organizing this second edition of our Knowledge Exchange series. This time we're going to discuss the concept of usability and evaluation, using as examples works that we have done, consultants that work with us. So Andrea has been doing extraordinary work in gender, and she'll discuss work that she's done for us for the Red Cross. And then later, João is going to discuss the usability of his other evaluations that he's been part of. They're both Eval consultants, and I think this is a great opportunity actually for people to ask questions about what makes an evaluation useful. As the saying goes, if it's just applied social research is not evaluation, right? And why is it not so? Then we're going to hear from our speakers today about just how important it is to communicate your findings and actually have them be relevant to your stakeholders. And that's not an easy process, and it's not something that's done after the fact. The entire process of the evaluation needs to take into consideration the priorities of the stakeholders and what the information is going to be used for. And so there's going to be a lot of debate around that. I'm going to be monitoring the chat box. So whatever questions you have, don't hesitate to write them on the chat box. And then at the end, once we have the discussion, I'll bring them up. And then we'll start the discussion. Okay, so if you don't need to wait until the end of the presentations to write your questions. Okay, so without further ado, we can go ahead and start. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Fabrizio. I will now hand it over to Andrea for her presentation. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank Fabrizio and Yasmin for inviting me to be part of this webinar today. I'm very happy to be here to talk about such a special evaluation for me. When I finished this evaluation last year, I felt like I'd finished a master dissertation. I say this not just because of the size of the report, but because, like every dissertation, it already had many subtopics that could be explored beyond the major results. So that's what I've been doing ever since. I've already written 2 articles, which you can read on the Eval blog. And today I'm going to focus on the usability of this evaluation. But to be more specific, I wanted to show you the changes that needed to be made the evaluation to explain to what extent they could generate more useful practices for all people involved in this intervention. This evaluation was about a program for safer access to essential public service in Brazil that is called Programa Acesso Mais Seguro. Next, please. Yasmin, you too. Yes. I will divide my speech into 6 parts. First, I'm going to briefly introduce the program with some contextual aspects. Afterwards, I will summarize the evaluation that was made, present the objectives and the methodology initially proposed. Then I will present the major challenges and solutions found during this evaluation. And finally, I will talk about the foremost lessons learned. Next, please. The Programa Acesso Mais Seguro, or AMS for short, was developed by the International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, in Brazil, and started in 2016. The program proposed to mitigate the consequence of armed violence for professionals and for the population served through strengthening the capacities of the public institutions regarding analysis context related to risk, crisis, and stress management. Among the cities where the program was implemented, 4 were selected for the evaluation: Porto Alegre, Rio de Janeiro, Duque de Caxias, and Fortaleza. And it counted mainly with the partnership of the municipal secretariats of education, health, and social assistance. Next, please. The major objectives of this evaluation were to carry out an impact evaluation of the program, review the indicators used to monitor the program, and to conduct a survey on the population's perception of the effects of the program on the provision and the access to essential publics. The last object aims to meet a new requirement that has lately been made by international humanitarian agencies, which is to provide a response for the affected population that is served by them. In the case of ICRT, they created a framework for accountability to affect people to be used in the evaluation in all their programs. Next, please. The major research techniques suggested for the evaluation should follow this order. First, a review of the AMS structuring, implementation, and execution documents. Second, conducting interviews with key informants from partner municipal secretariats in each city. Third, holding focus groups with professionals from the evaluated essential service or the frontline staff, such as doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers, etc., in addition to groups with community members, represented by school members who live in the evaluated area. Fourth, the application of a survey to learn about the population's perception of the program effects on essential public service. And last, the holding of a workshop to support the review of the indicators used in the program. Next, please. During this evaluation, we faced some challenges in each evaluation objectives proposed, and I will point out the major ones there. First, it was noticed from the beginning that the required evaluation could not be conducted as an impact evaluation, especially because a lack of baseline data was to identify. Which is one of the necessary conditions for carrying out an impact evaluation. I won't go into too much detail on this topic, but you can find out more in an article I wrote for the Plan Eval blog, where I talk more about the conditions for conduct an impact evaluation. Second, during the analysis of the indicators carried out by our team of evaluators, it was noticed that there was a huge discrepancy discrepancy in data collection among the municipal secretariats. This was happening especially because not all secretariats in the 4 cities were using the platform provided by the ICRC to record data. As a result, the ones that did not use the platform ended up ignoring a large number of indicators, which also proved to be a great challenge. And to further complicate this point, some secretariats face major structural and personnel challenges to collect and monitor indicators. Third, this program, like thousands of other humanitarian programs around the world, has been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. In this case, it became clear after the focal groups with scholar members of the communities that the population would have great difficulty in providing the perception of whether or not the program was impacting access to service over the last few years. Consider that the schools, for example, were closed for more than a year, which also led us to understand that the population did not know about the program. As a result, the general perception of the population would not be measuring anything. The impact of the program would be imperceptible in any case. Next, please. So I list here the major solutions we thought together with the ICRC. I forgot to say that all the challenge were taken to the coordination of the ICRC. So they were closely supporting our team of evaluators, and together we managed to find solutions that were more realistically practical and useful for the programs. From the beginning, according to our analysis, we made it clear that the evaluation to be made should be one of results and not impact. And that's what we did, following the OECD criteria of relevance, efficiency, coherence, impact, and sustainability. For the review of the indicators, we held 2 workshops, and in addition to the ICRC members, we included the focal points of the municipal secretariats. This was the way we thought to involve all those responsible for guiding the collection and data recording, as well as those responsible for analyzing and monitoring them. Once involved in the indicator review process, they could pick up which indicators made the most sense and were most useful for the purpose of the program. At the end of the review, with a smaller number of indicators, we realized that some of them could already be tested in the proposed survey for this evaluation, but the sample of the survey would be another. During the focus groups with professionals, it became evident that stress management is being ineffective or non-existent in most partner secretariats. This caught the attention of the evaluators team, because in the end, stress results in absence from work, transfers, and even dismissals of professionals, what harms the population without the appropriate public service. And our intention was to give prominence and voice to the group of professionals understood as part of the population affected by the consequence of armed violence. The professionals' reports during the focal groups were very strong in this sense, especially from the educational professionals, mainly in Rio de Janeiro. Then we applied an online questionnaire to professionals to test some of the revised. The results of this survey have already served to start a data baseline for the. Next, please. So the final order of the research techniques has been changed. as you can see in the arrows marked in orange. So we did the review of indicators before the summer. Next, please. As the major learners for ICRC, I think the review of indicators is a central point in the usability of this evaluation. Since the most adequate indicators allow them to monitor the program better, because they would know what they are really monitoring. Also, by having access to research tools more appropriate to the program, they can provide better answers to the affected population more widely and carry out future surveys with the population of the communities. In this process, with more accurate information, they can measure the impact of the program in the future. And after an impact evaluation, they may realize that they need to improve the indicators and the tools, understand that this is a learning cycle. Next, please. And I think it's worth to say the major learns for us evaluators. I learned that it's important to maintain confidence in our knowledge and skills as a way of offering what we know can be used for all people involved in this intervention. All this confidence must be supported by the transparent admission of our knowledge about some aspects, not always immediately revealed by the stakeholders. What reinforces the collaborative and the participative work with everyone involved in a humanitarian social intervention project. And in this particular evaluation, my soft skills to negotiate with the stakeholders developed a lot, like being a good listener, being empathetic, and having a lot of patience to negotiate it and to explain the necessary changes during the evaluation process. It was really a great learning experience. Next, please. So that's what I want to share with you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Andrea.
Go ahead, Yasmin.
No, I was just thanking Andrea for her very interesting presentation. And let me just switch on the camera. Next, we have a presentation from João, who unfortunately couldn't join us, but he was kind enough to send us a video with his presentation. And I'm just going to share it in a minute. Just give me 1 second.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to Plan Eval's team for the invitation, and I'm deeply sorry because I was not able to join you live for this webinar. But yeah, I was invited to share with you some of my visions on the topic of evaluation utilization. And yeah, I mean, it's a pleasure to be here and to share my visions and my experience with you. I'm not going to give you a lecture on evaluation utilization. I will mainly share with you some of the things I've been reflecting about and thinking about throughout my experience as an evaluator, but mainly focus on one specific example of an evaluation I did with Plan Eval early this year. I mean, we ended the process in February, March for UNICEF Uruguay, and I will use that example to share with you some of my suggestions or recommendations on how can we enhance or foster better and more effective utilization of the results of the process and everything that an evaluation process entails. So I will share with you a brief presentation just for you to follow my line of thoughts. I will structure my presentation in 3 topics. The main one is just a bunch of general remarks on this idea of evaluation utilization. I will start by refreshing our memories in terms of why do we do evaluations, why are evaluations useful, and why are they implemented throughout the lifespan of a project or a program or a public policy. And then I will use that idea to start the reflection on why is it important to foster, to promote a different level of utility and utilization and ownership of the evaluation results and processes throughout this job, this task that we do. Then I will present you briefly the example of the evaluation I did in Uruguay. We did, the team of Plan Eval in Uruguay. Giving you just some context on what was this evaluation, what were the main specificities that generated a very interesting opportunity to bring to the process a very focused view of how can we use evaluation to improve, to be better, to extend the impact that we are having and we are achieving with our program. And then I will share with you some ideas, food for thought, as I wrote in the presentation. And I don't want you to take it as statements or universal truths, but basically personal perspectives, ideas, things I've been reflecting on based on my experience and the evaluations I've been performing. So yeah, well, when we think of an evaluation process, no matter what is the context or the type of object we are assessing or evaluating, we know that we have mainly two big goals here. One is to focus on accountability, to prove that the project or the program or the policy is effective and is reaching or achieving the results and the objectives and all that. And unfortunately, that's what I've been dealing with the majority of the evaluations I've been doing. I mean, I started working on a very low level in terms of small projects for NGOs, and then I went up on the ladder to public policies. And I would say that 80% of the evaluations I did were mainly focused on this accountability, to prove to the donors or the people who were funding the projects or the programs or the policies that things were going according to the plan. And that is okay. It's very interesting. It's very important for a matter of transparency, democracy, and all that. But on the other hand, I mean, it's very important as well to not forget that the evaluation processes are also focused or should be focused on improvements, learning, capacity development, and all that. And yeah, this is just a very brief reflection on when we speak about utilization of the evaluation. Of course, accountability is important to prove the effectiveness of things. But for me, we are talking mainly or specifically on the second level of these objectives. I mean, utilization is the trigger for the improvement. If you don't put in place the recommendations or the insights you gave to the team in charge for the implementation to make changes that can have a positive effect on the effectiveness and efficiency and all that, impact, sustainability, all the criteria, then I mean, it's just a report that ends up in a drawer and that's it. Yeah, so the ultimate idea, the ultimate purpose of an evaluation process should always be to support decision-making processes, to make them better, more effective, more impactful, and to help organizations, national states, public authorities, people in general, to reach optimal outcomes or better outcomes, more impactful changes. So why is it important to talk about the utilization? Why should it be a focus of our discussions and our action as professionals of evaluation? Mainly because most of the times the evaluation are expensive for those who are hiring the evaluation teams, especially when we talk about external evaluation teams, but also internal evaluation teams. So people and the organizations and the people in charge for the organization should take should do their utmost to take the most out of the processes, making sure that every piece of recommendation, insight, or advice is useful and in line with their expectations and needs and all that. But more than that, they are used, they are applied, they are activated somehow. But I want to bring another aspect to the discussion, and I will come back to this later, which is the utilization on the perspective of the process and not just the results. And for the same reason I was mentioning before, I mean, this is a unique process for most of the organizations. They have this unique chance to have a group of experts helping them to rationalize how was the project, what is going on well or not, why, what should be done differently, what aspects should we adjust or take out of the project and introduce new things. And also because this opportunity is very, very interesting from a perspective of capacity development of the teams that hire the evaluation teams. And some people are very, very experienced in terms of project management and all that, but they don't have the expertise, the know-how in terms of evaluation methodologies and approaches and the options that are on the table and they can choose. So it's very interesting to use these opportunities to foster this, to develop these capacities, but also because we can use evaluations. And when I say we, I talk to the community, to the evaluation community in general. We can use these evaluations to foster a better or more solid evaluation culture in general, not just inside the organizations, but also in terms of the donors and the people who are funding the programs, in terms of the stakeholders, political or just community stakeholders. It's a very interesting opportunity. And I think that when we talk about evaluation utilization, we should think about these two levels, the during the process level and the end of the process level, when we get the final recommendations, the findings, the conclusions and all that. Based on that, I want to give you a brief overview of what was this evaluation, the Digital Bridges for Educational Equity. This is a translation from Spanish, so probably you won't find this on the internet with this title, Puentes Digitales. You can look for that and maybe you will find it. It's an initiative that was developed jointly between Eval, which is a public institution inside the educational system, the national educational system in Uruguay, focused on innovation in education, and UNICEF Uruguay. And the project was funded under an international call for innovative solutions for education. And it was the only project funded throughout Latin America. So it's a very interesting example to bring. The idea of this intervention was to promote the development of digital solutions related with education that can create better conditions for a more inclusive and with better quality education in general in the country. They identified several lines of action, and the project, the initiative itself, was encompassed in 5 different interventions that were focused on different target groups like teachers, students with disabilities, students that are regular people, but they don't have access, for example, to English classes or to technology in the regions where they live in Uruguay. And the project was spread all around the country, even though it didn't have, I mean, it had the national scope for this because it was implemented in very different regions throughout the country, but it didn't have any universal approach. It was not for everyone. It was for a very well-defined group of people in the situation of each of the 5 interventions. In terms of the evaluation strategy, the proposal since the beginning was to use a developmental evaluation. This was a challenge from the beginning because UNICEF at Latin America level, they knew what this was. They wanted this as the approach to be implemented throughout the evaluation. But the team in charge for managing the contract, which was the evaluation team, the monitoring and evaluation team of UNICEF Uruguay, they never had experience with this. So it was first time for them, and everyone was a little bit skeptic about, is this going to work? Because this has different characteristics from a typical classical evaluation approach. So it was one of the things that was a risk at the beginning, and I can say now that we managed to use it as an opportunity to build trust on us, on the process, and also use this as an opportunity to develop capacities at national level, both in Uruguay, in UNICEF, and also in Ceibal as well. So the main goals were to generate evidence on which of the 5 interventions were effective or not, and why. To provide some insights on what improvements should be made to improve the interventions and the results and the effectiveness, but mainly to give some insights on how can this intervention be scaled up, and going from a project or a program to a public policy, making it universal. And this is a challenge. But fortunately, both Ceibal and UNICEF Uruguay had the support from the beginning from the national, the Ministry of Education, so which is a very good support from the beginning that helped a lot the development of the recommendations and the discussion of the recommendations in the end. But also because it was a pilot project funded at international level, but it was implemented at a very small scale, considering the globe, of course, to give some insights as well to UNICEF at Latin America's span to how can they replicate at least some of the interventions there that are part of the project in other realities, neighboring countries or countries that have the same challenges or the same educational structure in terms of system and how things work. So this was another interesting challenge for us. Just to tell you that things went very, very well. And this example was chosen by me as a good example as how can we do things to make them as useful as we can. And in fact, that's the feedback we got from both UNICEF and Ceibal. I mean, they really, really enjoy the process as well as the results, but especially the process for them was very, very interesting in terms of the opportunity for regular discussions. I mean, things like the theory of change, they didn't have a theory of change for the project. So we started by that point, by creating a theory of change for every one of the 5 interventions of the project. And were very, very interesting moments to build trust with them. That's one of my main messages to facilitate the evaluation utilization, is to build trust. Take every opportunity we have with the team that is in charge of the programs that we are evaluating to build trust on us, especially because they see us most of the times as the spies, the people that come to make judgments and that have a lot of power in terms of what we put on the report. And sometimes I believe that people ignore that those conclusions are based on evidence and not in our opinions, but let's move on. So in general terms, the evaluation was very, very interesting, both from their side and our side. It was very interesting, the discussion, the reflection, the capacity to share problems, challenges from both sides of the process, to find solutions in a common, participative, collaborative way. It was very, very honest from the beginning, very horizontal, the relationship, very transparent as well. And the challenge here was to distinguish things. There was this risk that at some point we could be seen as part of the team, and we were always remembering that, okay, we have a very frank and honest communication. It's very informal, everything, but we are still the evaluation team and you are still the program team. And that was clear from the second reunion, from the second meeting we had, and things went very, very smoothly, and it was very interesting. And based on that, I would like to share with you some thoughts and reflections I've been thinking about that are suggestions or things for you to reflect after this presentation. And the first one is this idea of, if we want to promote the utilization of the results of the evaluation, and by results I mean findings, conclusions, recommendations, suggestions, best practices, whatever we consider as the results, it's very important to promote from the beginning a collaborative process throughout the entire evaluation process, not just something that we discuss at the beginning and we see each other again by the end of it, just to present the report and discuss some of the things that are written there. So it was very, very interesting that we were focused on the first meetings to create these conditions for this process to be as collaborative and participatory and transparent and honest as possible, without losing focus on what was the job to be done and what was the focus in terms of the results that we were, or the goals that we were as our mandate, the things we had to deliver at the end. Throughout this process of creating these conditions for this process to be collaborative and participatory, a group of things were not as clear as they should at the beginning, which is quite normal in an evaluation to have some things that are not exactly defined or need to be discussed, whatever. But in this case, also because they didn't know the approach, the evaluation methodology that we were proposing and we end up using. So we had to ask them a lot of questions and to reach a common understanding on very different things regarding the methodology, the scope of the evaluation, timeline, the priorities, and all that. But also from the beginning, we started asking them who is going to be in charge for the follow-up of these interventions? Who is going to be in charge for the implementations of the recommendations? Who is going to be in charge to make sure that the stakeholders that have interest and power in terms of decision-making, that have influence in the national educational system, how can we engage them in an effective way throughout the project without tiring them or making this process overwhelming for them? And that required the definition at an early stage as well of who do we need to have on board. And it's not just a question of which stakeholders are we going to inquire throughout the evaluation. I mean, it's another level. Okay, we need to define who are the stakeholders or who are the groups that we need to interview or bring to focus group discussion or send a survey for them to answer. But also, we needed to clarify at the early stage of the evaluation who is going to be present, for example, in the discussion of the findings, or who is going to come and participate in a workshop to develop the recommendations. Who should we have in the final moment, the public presentation of the evaluation, and how should we engage them? Should we just present the evaluation and that's it, or should we create a forum in terms of bringing people to the stage and create different groups in terms of discussions and then share the ideas in the end? And that was exactly what we did, and it was very, very, very interesting. Also, it was very important for us as the evaluation team to have a very clear and for us, I mean, I put it here, it was very effective. All the evaluation management strategy. We had meetings every single week on Wednesdays. Sometimes we had 2 meetings during the week on Wednesday and Friday. And this was very, very important to share what was the progress that we were achieving throughout the week, what were the difficulties, what adjustments do we need to make in the evaluation strategy to make sure that we will reach the goals, but also that we will meet the expectations and the needs of both Eval and UNICEF Uruguay. And these moments and these very, very clear, basic but very effective mechanisms that we developed were very helpful to create trust, to build trust, and for them to have the openness to to tell us things that were not on the initial mandate, and tell us, for example, that, oh, this evaluation question was not on the evaluation matrix, but if you have something, we would like to have some recommendations or insights on this. And we were managing this together and defining and adjusting all the strategy throughout the way. Of course, this is also part of the development evaluation approach, but it was very, very interesting. And this evaluation management strategy or system was very, very effective and helped us a lot. Also, I think it's very important that, of course, we have a mandate. Of course, there's a contract, and there are the terms of reference that are the guide for us and for our work. But something that it was very important for us to implement a very flexible approach in terms of, okay, we are not losing focus, but maybe we need to sacrifice some things in order to have others. So let's discuss which ones are we available to sacrifice in order to have other things that were not planned from the beginning. And that was really interesting, because at some point we changed dramatically the strategy for one of the interventions. It were 5, so we had different approaches for the 5 of them, and one of them we definitely changed the process in the middle of the way. And it was a very, very sharp decision, very well thought. But yeah, I mean, the main idea on this topic is that the focus on our side, from the evaluation team side, is that, okay, maybe sometimes we don't want to sacrifice our plan because we have a plan and it's perfect. Okay. Yeah, but sometimes we need to sacrifice the perfection in order to fulfill or to reach or to meet the needs and expectations of those who are going to do something, hopefully, with evaluation. Otherwise, we take the risk of doing something that was, according to the plan, very efficient, very effective in terms of respecting the steps we had planned. But in the end, the outcome, the final outcome, or the final output is not what the client expected. It's halfway of meeting that expectation. Also, something that we did, and it was very, very interesting as well, was using these weekly meetings to develop capacities. I mean, sometimes we didn't have that much to share, but we used those moments, that hour we had on Wednesday afternoons, to refresh some ideas about the methodology, about the methods we were using to collect data. How are we going to triangulate the information or cross quantitative with qualitative information? It was very, very interesting for them as well to feel that they were owning the process, and they had a voice that was taken into account to adjust and make it as useful for them as well, and not just thinking about the final product, but also throughout the process, the small adjustments that were needed. Something that is quite common in several evaluations, but I believe it's very interesting as well, is to when we define the plan, to create specific moments to discuss findings. We had like 2 or 3 moments to discuss the findings before the preliminary report was presented. And in fact, we presented the first draft of the report without recommendations, and we asked them for feedback on the report. And after that, then we moved and we organized a workshop to co-develop recommendations and to look to the lessons learned and then see if there was any other that we were missing. It was very, very interesting as well. In terms of the report, I mean, this is just basics for most of you, I'm pretty sure, but the idea of clarifying what is the structure they need in terms of report. And I'm not just talking about templates and design, I'm talking about the content structure, how things are organized. And we changed this as well throughout the process, because UNICEF had this template, and at some point we came to the conclusion together that, okay, this report, this structure is very useful, but not for this case. So let's change the order. And then we discussed this with the director of evaluation at regional level. He agreed with the idea, and it was very, very interesting. But also something that we did was, at some point, we were risking to have a report with 200 pages. it was a lot of information because we were collecting and gathering and analyzing information for 5 interventions and then for the major program. So at some point we decided, well, we did not decide this. I mean, it was part of the terms of reference at the beginning, but the structure was not clear. It was supposed to be something very brief, and in the end we end up having like mini reports for every intervention with specific conclusions, findings, and recommendations. Things that are quite easy to activate for the teams of each specific intervention and not just for the whole program as one. Something very clear as well, make sure that the recommendations are clear and actionable, but also that they are directed to someone. I mean, we cannot say do something without saying or telling to whom are we recommending this type of action. This is a different idea, is that we tried to create specific moments to commit the stakeholders, and especially here the ministry and the higher level stakeholders. Whenever we had the chance to meet them or to gather them in a meeting, in a Zoom meeting or whatever, and we were talking about changes or improvements or the implementation of some recommendation, we were trying at the same time not just to validate the idea, but to commit them. Who is going to make sure that this is going to happen? Who is taking the lead of this? And it was very interesting as well throughout this process, because both the National Agency for the evaluation of the educational system was involved, the ministry, Eval, UNICEF Uruguay. So it was a very, very interesting discussion as well to create a sort of an action plan. Sorry. Yeah, the other two are repeated. So the idea is that with that approach, we created a sort of an action plan for the implementation of the recommendations. Something as useful or as simple as like this recommendation will be implemented by this entity and that entity. And sometimes it's written on the report, but organizations are not even aware, or there's not a real or a factual commitment with those actions and with the activation or implementation of the recommendations. Final ideas, of course, dissemination, but not just the idea of sharing reports or information, of making the information available, digestible, if we want to say. I mean, to facilitate as much as possible the ownership of everyone that should be engaged and involved in the future of the conclusions and the recommendations of the evaluation. And yeah, the final comment is this one. I mentioned it already. I mean, the better way to, or the easiest way for me to facilitate or to promote the utilization of evaluation is to build trust around the process and around the results of the evaluation. If the teams in charge for the implementation of the programs or the policies are comfortable or are confident that the things that we are including in the report are useful for them and will help them, probably they will be more eager to put some commitment on the implementation of the recommendations. And something that we did and was very helpful for us to build this trust was throughout those brief reports that we did, the 5 brief reports for every one of the 5 interventions. We presented them in the meetings we had to develop or to give them the report and present the report, was to give them like quick wins, very, very easy measures that they can activate from one day to the other, and that would have a very interesting impact and very visible impact in terms of, or effects in terms of efficiency and effectiveness and reach or scope of the intervention. So that was something that we started doing it almost without intention. We did it because it was part of the conversation or the discussion, but at some point we understand this is an added value for them. So let's put it in the reports, in the brief reports, some very quick and easy to activate suggestions or recommendations. Of course, we had bigger ones, more structured, more strategic ideas. But things like changing the calendar or changing the time or the schedule of some classes or stuff like that, or things how they were communicated with some groups, people that were not meeting and should meet, very, very easy things to activate and that help them to trust the process and trust our suggestions and our reflections with them. So yeah, it was a very good example, and I wanted to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and I hope the discussion can be rich. I will watch it later on via YouTube. Thank you again, Yasmin and Fabricio, and enjoy the webinar. See you.
Thank you so much, João, for your presentation. We now have a couple of minutes for quick question and answers. Fabrizio, let me hand it over to you.
Thank you, Yasmin. Thank you, João, for brilliant presentation. Thank you again, Andrea. This is very much in the spirit of what we were expecting in terms of, a very concrete, tangible discussion around how can you make evaluations usable. Michael Quinn Patton, who many of you know in the evaluation profession, someone who's theorized around the usability issue a lot, especially thinking about ways in which an entire evaluation approach could be geared at producing actionable results. And some of you would be familiar with the concept of developmental evaluation. This is what João put to practice in Uruguay, and it's really about interaction, but as he said, focused interaction, right? So everybody should be on board and understanding, why they're doing what they're doing and what they're going to do with the information, and steering the evaluator as the discussion goes along towards those goals. And it's also up to the evaluator to keep people focused in a way that it's not so much a methodological discussion about, how good is this evidence, or, give me your p-values, your correlations, etc. But more, okay, so we've organized, we've systematized these value judgments. How can the project produce better outcomes or more outcomes, as we go along, or in the next edition? And this is where Caroline's question about whether we were brought aboard at the beginning or at the end of the evaluation really comes to be a central question, because if it's about conceiving a project or a program, and you're the evaluator, and you're sitting down with people who are putting it together, and this is how originally developmental evaluation was done, then it's a bit of a blank slate, right? So that you can speculate, you can discuss a lot, and of course you're going to do some benchmarking with similar practices, but overall, what you're doing is helping people conceive a program that will be the most efficient or effective, or whatever the goals are there. But if you come towards the end, it's more like, okay, how can we still improve this, or how can we learn from the past to produce a second edition or a scale up that's better, that's more relevant. And so I'll direct that question to Andrea. Andrea, did we come into this evaluation towards the end? Was the project over? So were you looking back? Was it a retrospective evaluation? Or were you helping people along the way as the project progressed? And tell us a little bit more about to what extent this timing of the evaluation influenced the usability of the recommendations. Thanks.
This in the case of AMS, in this case of this evaluation, we had a period to evaluate it. 2016 to 2021. But the program is not over yet. So we could offer some plan to they can continue. I saw the question of Caroline, and I about how can you ensure that the recommendations we used, and I want to answer Fabrizio to be more exactly to think about this. How we can help them? We can I think we can present the results in a simple and clear and practical way. In this case of the AMS, about the indicators, we design a plan for them to monitor the indicators. So there were 18 indicators. We reduced for 24, and we presented them in a plan divided into 3 moments: ex ante, monitoring, and ex post. So they can use in 3 different moments to can monitor, to record data and monitor these data in the time. And we offer then also examples of questionnaires to be continue using for evaluated, for example, the perception of the professionals, or on a future process of evaluation of the population's process. So I think you can present all the results in a simple, clear, and practical ways, and the recommendations as the same.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks for that. And that dovetails with what João said about the quick wins and the ownership of results, is that you really have to get people involved and feel like they own the evaluation. Really simplify, but show practical applications of evaluative thought during the process of evaluation, right? So when he was talking about the digital bridges, and how during the discussion, and I hope UNICEF publishes this report because it's really good evaluation. It was highly rated, actually. That people were happy to understand. They already knew during the discussion that the data that they were being shown was going to be used to improve the program, and that improvement was clear to them. So that it was the action that was springing from the conclusion was tangible. It was and the utility of it was immediately perceptible. And just as you said, like you simplified the indicators in a way that people don't get lost in a sea of indicators, think, oh, we have this. We have we have a large number of indicators. It means we're monitoring really well. And well, oftentimes it's the opposite. You have too many indicators. That looks very professional, very thorough, very, deep sometimes. But, if it's too much, then you can't filter it, and you forget, what those indicators are for. And sometimes it's just too much that, that your team can handle that many indicators. So the process of making a selection of indicators in terms of relevance greatly increases the idea of ownership and the likelihood that they will be used. And that's also a point that Marta made in the chat box, in the sense that, let people have access to the databases as well, right? So let's have it not be mysterious. Let them have access. Let stakeholders have access to the data, so that they can also play with it. The people who feel statistically literate, they can play with the database as well, and produce their own indicators, and that increases obviously ownership and involvement. I think that's the time we had, right, Yasmin, for discussion. Apologies that João's presentation went a little long, but you'll be able to retrieve it and find it also on our social networks, on LinkedIn. Yasmin is gonna finish this webinar. She'll tell you what the next steps are. So that you can access this information. The slides, someone asked about the slides, that's going to be shared also with our consultants. And once again, I thank you all for your presence here today. I'll pass it over to Yasmin. Have a good day and afternoon, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Fabrizio, Andrea, and João, for the amazing and insightful presentations. Thank you so much for everyone who joined the chat. I also saw some very interesting discussions happening there. And if you watch this recording later and you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My email is Yasmin with a Y and an N at plan-eval.com. I'll be happy to direct your questions to, the relevant people. And also, if you have any ideas or thoughts that you would like to discuss in our upcoming knowledge exchange series, also please feel free to reach out to me. And I look forward to hearing from you. And till we see each other again. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Fabrizio. Thanks, everyone.